Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started to be respectful of time, but we do realize that others will be joining us as they are able to, and we welcome you whenever you can hop on. My name is Jill Nogueras. I'm the English coordinator at the Virginia Department of Education, and I am joined today by some of my colleagues in the Department of Learning and my colleagues in the Office of Student Assessment. We are extremely excited that you've decided to join us this afternoon as we start our next webinar series on assessment supports for 2020-2021. As you are aware by now, we are scheduled at the moment to move forward with assessments that are aligned to the 2017 English Standards of Learning. These are the assessments that were supposed to be in effect last spring before school closed. And have now been moved to this spring, and we are on schedule with those. So we wanted to offer some support and instructional advice as you are navigating these new waters and preparing your students in a variety of environments this year, as they still have these assessments coming up at the end of the year, to kind of support them with instruction that's aligned to the standards and meets the rigor of the 2017 standards, which is a little bit more complex in nature than our 2010 standards. So it is a shift. So we wanted to collaborate with our peers in the assessment office to offer some supports and to give you some insights and advice on what you could be doing in your classrooms this year to support those students as we move forward. Just want you to know that if you have any questions during the webinar, you are welcome to put those in the chat. If you switch those over to all attendees, then we are able to respond to all attendees, and then everyone gets the same information. I do have several colleagues from Instruction, Colleen Cassida and Carmen Curick, to answer your questions on the instructional side. I will be doing that as well while Carmen is speaking. And then we do have some friends on the assessment side. Chris, Sarah, Melody Bushley, and Lauren Zielinski will be supporting on the assessment side for questions in the chat, while Catherine Ringley is supporting the third grade webinar. So just make sure that if you have questions as we're going along, that you put those there. Just wanted to kind of give a little bit of background information for you. A lot of the information that is shared today is kind of born from the Recover, Redesign, and Restart 2020 document that was shared on June 9th as Governor Northam announced his phased reopening plan for Virginia schools. So probably the first thing that I want to make sure everybody understands is that we are in a bit of a different situation than we were in last spring. Last spring, we were in an emergency school closure, which prompted us to cancel, or the State Department, the USED, to cancel testing as schools were closed. Right now, we are in a phased reopening plan, and instruction is happening for students. So we are moving forward with the 2017 standards of learning and supporting the assessments that are aligned with that. So in thinking about this Recover, Redesign, Restart, we've really got to think about how we are supporting our students through authentic learning experiences. And you can't get any more authentic than we are this year because we're in such a variety of situations. So just kind of thinking about what we're trying to do to provide these authentic learning experiences for our students, to kind of bridge some of the skill gaps that happened with the immediate shutdown of schools, but also to support that enhanced critical thinking that you see in the 2017 standards, and then improve their creativity, their engagement, how to motivate students in all of these different settings, and thinking about how we can support students moving forward. So we really hope to cover a lot of those topics as we are exploring these materials today. So what we wanted to do, normally if we had the assessments last year in the spring, we would have had data and information about how students performed on the new assessments. Well, without the new assessments, we don't have that data. So we looked at a variety of resources that we have, including all of the interviews that we did with school divisions last year about their improvement in SOL scores and what pieces and functions were working for them. And so we have gone through all of the materials that we have to provide examples of SOL content and the progression of reading skills that we keep talking about. As you know, the 2017 standards were written and aligned to be a skills progression from kindergarten through 12th grade. So for our teachers who teach seniors, when you read these new standards, they were written with the understanding of a student who started kindergarten under 2017. So what you see is a jump in rigor, and I'm sure that the third grade teachers whom I am speaking with today have noticed a jump in that rigor because the third grade standards were written as if a kindergartner started under 2017. So we wanted to provide these supports to show you how you might use instruction this year to kind of scaffold and get at some of those skill gaps, but also get the students ready for their first ever reading SOL assessment as it's aligned to the new 2017 standards. And just want to note that as we're looking at the assessment questions that are in this presentation, they're not meant to mimic SOL test questions. Instead, they're actually written to show teachers how we can scaffold those questions and start with very basic on a specific skill and get to a more complex critical thinking, open-ended question, kind of aligned to the same skill so that we can hit the variety of students who sit in our classrooms. And so what you will see is kind of a progression of each of the questions based on a skill, just to show you where you might need to differentiate your instruction or support students based on your small groups in asking about the same kinds of skill, but that align with the rigor of 2017 and can be formatted and, tweaked to work with the individual students with whom you teach. So we do want to show you that, these definitely progress in difficulty, but also in skill. And they are not the assessment SOL test questions, but they are meant to support the instruction of the standards and have students better prepared for that end of year assessment. So keep in mind that this is supplemental information and it's to support your teaching as you're going through with the 2017 standards of learning, and that our instructional focus should remain on the standards as a whole, and that the selection of text that you use should be based to support the introduction and review of skills. So we're not talking about a situation where we're going to hone in on a very specific fact and opinion, and we're only going to talk about fact and opinion for 2 weeks. No, but what we might show you here is an example of some scaffolded questions on a specific skill to give you that variety that you're looking for. But we are not advocating that you teach these skills in isolation. And I think as you go through the materials that we give you with this presentation, you will see that we've picked out and highlighted some skills that are present within the text, but that in all reality, these are just supposed to be questions to support your instruction. So in reality, while this third grade presentation is only going to focus on a couple of specific skills, you would want to look in some of the other grade level presentations to get ideas and question stems for some of the other skills. And I know that my colleagues will get into that in more depth as we go on, but just wanted to make sure everybody understood that we are talking about the standards as a whole and not trying to get into specific kill and drill of skills. Always the current reminder that we want to make sure that we put at the forefront of each of these presentations is that it is important to look at the curriculum framework. I know you all have access to the new blueprints, and the blueprints walk you through the standards, but it is through the curriculum framework where you will find the specific skills necessary for, say, third grade. And it's very important to look down in second grade, especially this year as we're talking about scaffolding lost learning, but also to be looking at the fourth grade, because you do have students working with you this year who are reading at a fourth grade level, maybe even higher, and we are not looking to hold them back. So we teach everyone, and we have everyone who needs extra support to people who need additional challenges. So it's important that we look at that curriculum framework to give us a clear idea of what we mean within the umbrella standards. So we're going to take you through a process today that is 4 steps. We're going to talk about selecting authentic text that's grade level appropriate and that can provide instructional scaffolding and that is rich and can be used for a variety of purposes. And as I claimed, as I said before, we are going to highlight specific skills, but as you go through the text that we've selected for you, you will find that we highlight other skills within the text to support that instruction. And we're going to talk about the second step is looking at the content and the progression of the standards to figure out where our students are and where they need to go next. Then we'll check out the sample question starters to think about asking students before, during, and after instruction that align with the skills and the standards, but that also ask students to think critically and deeply about the text that they're reading. And then we're going to talk about instructional resources that we have available for you, but that can also be used with these specific skills to support grade 3 in the upcoming reading SOL test. So I'm going to turn this over to Catherine Ringley now from our assessment office, who is going to talk to you about selecting authentic text.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We're hoping to provide you with another tool as you are introducing or reviewing skills with the 3rd grade students. So our first step is, as Jill said, selecting authentic text. And when you're selecting a text to read with students, it's important to review it first to ensure that it's going to support your purpose for reading. You want to set the purpose, and that may be one of 2 things. You may first identify what skills you want to introduce or review, and then find a passage or a text that supports those skills you identified. Or you might select an authentic text, and then through reviewing that text, determine which skills that text would best support being introduced or reviewed. After that, you're going to want to read to locate examples of the skills that support the purpose that you have identified. Once you discover that your passage supports the identified purpose, and it includes examples that focus on the desired skills, you would want to move ahead with using that passage for instruction. As Jill said, we know that the reading standards spiral, and they complement one another in terms of reading comprehension. So as you're using that text, and you may find some additional comprehension skills within it, you should continue to use those to support instruction and reading comprehension. And it's also important to ensure that your passage supports the use of guiding questions to provide the necessary background information to support student comprehension, engagement, and the application of skills. If while you are reviewing your passage, you find that it is not appropriate, you should select a new passage to support the purpose you've determined for reading, or you may decide to continue with that text, but identify some new skills to review or introduce instead. So we have given an example of 2 texts to accompany this presentation, and annotations, which are commentary or explanation about the text, will include some discussion points and guiding questions to support review and introduction of some identified skills for these 2 texts. This is just a screenshot of the text one of the texts that we selected for the 3rd grade. You'll see that in the right-hand side, a note from VITA program. That's us. That's the VDOE Office of Student Assessment and Department of Learning, writing some annotations to follow along with the text. And when you open this document, you will see the several skills identified to help with review. So the first passage that we identified for support is fiction. It's called Exploring South Island. And again, there will be an annotated Word document for additional support with these specific skills. In this passage, you'll find support for the introduction and review of making, confirming, and revising predictions, identifying the narrator, and asking and answering questions.
Good afternoon, everybody. Now we're moving into step 2 of this process. So once you have identified a text and noted the features that kind of lend themselves to certain skills, then the next step would be really cross-checking with the standards of learning for English and the curriculum framework to make sure that the questions that you use to guide your conversation and discussions are aligned with what the standards are asking. You want questions to be accessible to all learners. So approaching questions in a variety of ways is important. So really looking at the grade level that comes before you and the grade level that comes after you to identify what questions would be appropriate for all of your learners in your classroom. So one of the identified skills from the text that Catherine shared with you a minute ago was making predictions. And here you can see the standards of learning from grades 2, grades 3, and grades 4 for this skill and how they change in complexity as students get older. So in 2nd grade, you see that students are making and confirming predictions, and then in 3rd grade, they're adding the revisions process. So now we're making, confirming, and going back to revise our predictions. And then in 4th grade, really kind of combining all of this to draw conclusions and make inferences about the text using text support. So moving to the next, one of the other skills identified for the text that Catherine shared is identifying the narrator. And this is something that is introduced in grade 3, so identifying the narrator of a story. So you will note that it is not in 2nd grade. So in 3rd grade is the first time that students may be hearing about this. And then in 4th grade, identifying the narrator of a story and the speaker of a poem. And then, one of the other skills that was identified to go with this text is asking and answering questions. Not only answering questions about what they read, but being able to form their own questions about what they want to know and questions that really help to move the plot along. So questions that are really centered around story elements. So because this happened in the story, I wonder what X character will do next. So you can see in 2nd grade, asking and answering questions using the text for support, and then asking and answering questions about what is read in 3rd, and then in 4th grade, again, kind of combining a lot of skills to be able to summarize the events in the plot. So really looking at the grade levels that come before you and become after you are important, not only to make sure that you're teaching at the level of complexity of your grade level, but also to address all the learners in your classroom, because we want to ask a wide variety of questions and have a wide variety of discussion to give everybody an access point into the discussion.
Step 3, we have some sample question starters for our skill of prediction. You'll see that these questions are kind of scaffolding. Our first example is, what is a prediction? So kind of assessing if students know what they're being asked to do. And it's important to remember that students need that grade level content specific vocabulary like prediction. Some more examples based on the story. What will the character most likely do next? And we want that answer to be rooted in text support. In the future, these characters will most likely, and again, it would be appropriate to ask this question when the text provides support that the student can go back to and point to and say, well, this makes sense. based on, and then you would give a location or the title of the text, what will most likely happen next. And then after reading the passage, what will the character most likely do the next time this event happens? And include specific details from the text to support your answer. And this is an example of maybe incorporating some writing into the student responses. You would want them to support their answer with details from the text. And again, you would want that prediction to be rooted in text evidence so that they know exactly the skill that they are being asked to demonstrate. Some examples for the SOL 3.5F. What does a narrator do in a story? So again, pretty simple question to maybe get some understand the student's background knowledge of what a narrator is supposed to do. Then they can move on to who is telling the story, who is the narrator. You may find more difficult questions are more appropriate for the passage that you've chosen. Which phrase from this location tells the reader the narrator is one of the characters in the story? Or which detail from the story shows that the narrator is a character in the story? And they might select from a list of details that you've provided. And finally, again, incorporating some writing. Explain who is the narrator of the story. Include specific details from the text to support your answer. When you have students writing about what they know, it's easy to do more of those formative assessments and really understand what they know about the content and where you may need to repair some misunderstandings. Some question starters for 3.5G, again, was ask and answer questions. Which question does, for example, paragraph 3 answer? Which question is answered in the story? Which line from the poem best shows? And then a specific detail that is located in the poem. And finally, which paragraph answers the following question? Include specific details from the text to support your answer. And just to reiterate, these are not prescriptive questions, and they're also not meant to mimic exact SOL questions. But we wanted to provide some examples to help support as you're discussing some of this content with your students.
Now moving into step 4. So after listening to the conversation around the text and really diving into students' conversation and making note of where they are in their development and content knowledge, it's really important that you explore any instructional resources that are available to you through the VDOE. We have some that we will share today, but also the ones in your division that could address the needs in your classroom. So we're going to explore a few resources today that support the example text provided in today's webinar. And they can be found at the link at the top of this slide. So we'll talk you through a little bit how they're structured and how they're set up, and then we will share a couple specific resources that kind of address some of the learning needs that you may have in this text that was shared today. So on this slide, you will see a screenshot of this, all of the instructional plans from all the comprehensive English instructional plans that the VDOE has. And they're categorized by strand, but then they're also divided into grade bands. Again, because many of them can be adapted to multiple grade levels, and they are tagged with the SOLs for any of the grade levels that they might address. So hopefully easily organized and found for any of your needs, but that they are categorized in that way. So we'll move to the next slide. So here you see a couple screenshots of what the instructional plans look like when you pull them up. So just to illustrate how they are structured, the goal of these instructional plans when they were written by teachers and instructional leaders around the state of Virginia was really to demonstrate how the 4 strands of English could be integrated during instruction. So at the top are the strands that each plan addresses. So the primary strand is always listed first, and then any of the other integrated strands are always listed next. And then any essential understandings that are important for students to be able to know and do. And then it really goes into the SOLs. Again, to illustrate integration, the primary standard is listed first, and then any reinforced standards are listed next. Then there's also an academic background section that discusses any prerequisite knowledge or vocabulary that students will need in order to be successful with this instructional plan. So thinking about building background with some English learners or some students who may have missed that content from the year before, that might be a good section to go to. And then the steps to the actual instructional plan themselves. We always say that some of these plans could be a mini unit in themselves. There is no timeline on them. They can be built up into a mini unit, or they could be done over a period of a few days. So it's whatever the teacher needs according to their students and according to the time that they have. And then any modifications that can be made to these instructional plans or any adaptations. There are some sentence frames that teachers can use with students who may need that support, are all listed at the bottom. There's also some additional extensions of how could we incorporate more writing into this instructional plan? How can we have students extend this for some more engagement? So lots of additional resources at the bottom of each instructional plan. So then the one that we will be, well, one of several that we will be looking at today, this one, it supports one of the skills that was identified in the text that was shared, making, confirming, and revising predictions. So this instructional plan is on predictions and has students making predictions about the elements in the story using some pre-identified vocabulary from the text. So this one really illustrates and shows how the strands are integrated and reinforced together in one instructional plan, and really hits a lot of standards in one plan. So you can kind of see what we mean by integrated, and it's really centered around this idea of story elements. So it really hits the complexity of the standard as well, and can be used over many grade levels, several grade levels, and adapted as needed. So the next instructional plan, so this one around asking and answering questions. Again, all of these plans are linked on each slide for you to kind of quickly go to. This plan shows students how to answer and form questions based on the story elements. So it's incorporating what they already know and have learned through their elementary school career as third graders, and kind of taking that into account when asking and answering questions, because it really hits that we really ask and answer questions around those story elements. So take a look at that one and think about, where might this fall in this progression of, I've listened to my students say this. Do I need to go back and kind of introduce this concept, or do I need to use this instructional plan to build on what they already know? Really thinking about how these instructional plans or instructional resources can be used to, do I need to reintroduce the concept? Do I need to build on it? Do I need to follow up? Something like that. So now we're going to take a look at our next text that was chosen today.
The next text is an informational called An Ocean Farm. So this is a nonfiction passage. We've provided one fiction and one nonfiction for the grade 3 supports. And again, you'll want to look at that annotated Word document to get a full picture of what we're discussing today. But for this nonfiction text, it supports the introduction and review of text features, inference, and main idea.
Sorry, everyone, I was muted. Now we will go into step 2 for this text, and you can see that the skills that are chosen will look at the standards for the grades above and below. So previewing and using text features. So in second grade, they're previewing and using text features, and you can see some of the ones listed there. And then in third grade, previewing and using text features, and then there's some additional ones. And then in fourth grade, we are now using text features such as type, headings, and graphics to predict and categorize information. So again, just so important to look at the grade levels above and below you to make sure that you are teaching the right content, but also to make sure that you're addressing all the learners in your classroom. So the next skill that was identified that this text lent itself to was drawing conclusions. So in second grade, really looking at drawing conclusions based on the text. In third grade, really adding that using text for support. And then in fourth grade, drawing conclusions and making inferences using textual information as support. So really building out in complexity as the grade levels go along. And then the last one that was identified, last but not least, is identifying the main idea. So as you see on the slide, identifying the main idea looks the same in second grade, 2.8F, 3.6G, and 4.6C. It looks the same written in the standards, but this slide will be really important to reiterate that it's really important that you're looking in the curriculum framework and looking in that essential skills and understanding section for what students may need to additionally know and be able to do with this standard. So for example, in second grade, students are determining the main idea using details for support. And then in third grade, identifying details that support the main idea and stating the main idea in their own words. So stating that main idea in their own words is a little bit of a jump from second grade where they still have that support. And then in fourth grade, identifying the main idea and summarizing supporting details. So I think this is similar to that one of the other standards that we had before, where in fourth grade, now we're using what we know in order to summarize all the details in the text. So really important, as they might look the same in the standard, really important to look at those essential skills to see if there are any additional essential skills that students may need to be able to know and do as they're reading text so that we can address that in instruction.
Some sample question starters that we provided for the informational text. First, for text features, identify the text features in the selection. You might see how it's pretty simplistic. They might be able to identify a picture or a heading. But then if you want to move up in that rigor, why are different text features used in the selection? Which idea does the text feature in the article support? The title of this article helps the reader understand that. The text features are included in the article most likely to show, and then to integrate some writing into your questioning, inserting an inference from the text and explain how the selection supports this inference, include specific details from the text to support your answer. For 3.6E, which of these is most likely the reason that, and then something from the text. Based on the passage, what is the reason for? And based on the passage, what may happen if? And so these questions are kind of similar, but they're using different language. And again, you're going to want your students to be comfortable with talking about a skill or content with a lot of different words. You don't want to use the same words over and over again so that students can't be flexible with their language. Moving on, insert detail from the text. This happened most likely because, and maybe this paragraph explains that something from the text happened because. And then based on the passage, what can be inferred about a person, an event from the text, and include specific details to support your answer. And then finally for 3.6G, what is the main idea? Again, you may find that this kind of question is not appropriate for your students. You may feel pretty sure that they know what the main idea is. So you may move on to a different kind of question. But for some students, you may need to find out if they're able to identify what a main idea is in itself before they can start deciding the main idea of a text. Moving on, what this portion of the text is mainly about. The main idea of, so for example, paragraphs 3 through 4 is that, which heading best explains the information in, and then a location from the text. You see how that kind of overlaps with text features, because a heading should give kind of the main idea of the information below. Which sentence from this title of the text best describes the main idea? And what is the main idea of, include specific details from the text to support your answer. And again, getting students to write about what they know so that you can see what's going on when they're discussing these different skills and concepts.
So again, to step 4, really exploring the instructional resources that are out there that you may need to support student understanding of the skills that we've been talking about today. There is the lesson or the instructional plan that is linked on this slide is using text features in nonfiction. And you can see the standard there is 3.6C that it addresses. And this instructional plan really dives into introducing the concept of text features and really having students identify all of the ones that they would need to know up to this point. So just again, to reiterate, is to think about, you know, what is it that I need to do instructionally after listening to that student discussion? Do I need to reintroduce? Do I need to find some additional texts that really support student understanding, anything like that? And then the next instructional plan that is linked on this slide for you for the other skill that was identified in this text is using details to determine the main idea, grades 3 through 5. And this instructional plan really takes students through the process of determining the main idea and can be adapted for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Really appropriate for any of those and can be adapted to meet the standard for any of those. And also, again, there's lots of additional extensions that could be applied for really integrating the strand of writing, really integrating the strand of communication. So really thinking about, you know, this instructional plan doesn't just take them through the identification process, but really takes them through the process of how do I think about the topic? How do I look at the details that are there? And how do I use all of those to kind of determine what the main idea is? So an important instructional plan to kind of take a look at if you have some students who may be struggling with this process. So I think that is all of the examples for the text and skills that we had to share with today. And I believe Jill is going to continue and share some resources with you all.
Yes, thank you, Carmen and Catherine. Those were great resources that you shared. I want to explain to everyone who's with us today that all of the resources that they spoke of will be posted with the recording of the webinar. So you will get this recording, plus you will get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, and you will get the annotated passages that we showed you the screenshots of. So this will all be available for your use instructionally in the classroom and to share with colleagues. And just another reminder that the skills that were brought up today in support of these pieces of text were because that is what the text that we selected really highlighted as the skills that were present. We're never going to be in a situation where our students take an SOL assessment and have a passage and all of the questions are on main idea and details. That's not how reading works. When we look at reading passages and we're talking about comprehension, we're asking students a variety of questions about grade level material that support many, many skills. So I just want to reiterate that the skills that were pulled out today were just to provide you question stems that go with the skills that were really provided in the text. If you join us for any of the other webinars, you will notice that while they all follow this same structure, we have different question stems based on different skills because of what was highlighted in the texts for those pieces. So it may be that you need to not necessarily even join in for another webinar, though we would love to have you, but you could at least pull materials from the other grade level webinars to see what the question stems are like on different topics and different fiction and nonfiction pieces. But again, anytime we're assessing students on their reading comprehension, we aren't only focusing in on fact and opinion. We are asking them whatever the text presents. So please just keep this in mind. Also, because we are collaborating with the Office of Student Assessment and our materials are housed on a variety of pages between the different offices, we've decided to put our most important resources at the end of this presentation. So all these links are here to take you exactly where you'd want to go to get these materials so that you don't have to do a scavenger hunt on our webpage. So as you can see, the first link is going to take you to the English page where we have the standards of learning, the curriculum frameworks, the literacy plans, all of that material. We've also included all of the new blueprints that align with the 2017 standards of learning because we are no longer in our crosswalk year, and starting in spring of 2021, the reading assessments will be based off the 2017 standards. So those updated blueprints are all linked here for your use. In addition, we've linked the reading progression charts so that I know I talk a lot about using the curriculum framework and looking at the grade level before and the grade level after, and I also understand that that can be a cumbersome task. But I do want to remind everybody that we are going to be sitting with these assessments for a good 7 or 8 years, so I think it's well worth your time. But a cheat sheet, or maybe an easier, quicker way to look at that would be to spend some time with the progression charts, because that gives you an idea of where skills are introduced and where students should feel pretty comfortable and be assessed on different skills in your classroom and formatively, and where we might expect them to have reached some sort of mastery. So if you haven't checked out the progression charts, they are linked here. If you're using the blue ones, those are old, throw them away. We have moved on to the orange reading progression charts. Those are aligned with 2017. And then, of course, the curriculum framework and the standards of learning. We've also pulled together from a multitude of websites the different information that we have on computer adaptive testing, because as you know, the 3rd grade SOL test is a computer adaptive test, a passage-based computer adaptive test. So we have linked all of these pieces here for you to have as a reference and to kind of sort through and to work out with your colleagues as you're planning for your students this year. And then probably one of the most important pieces here is the assessment supports for 2020-2021 literacy webinar series, which you're sitting in right now, but that link will also be where all of the other presentation materials are housed. If you did not join us for the overview that we held on October 1st, I would encourage you to go back and watch that one, because we're showing exactly how we're structuring these and which topics we are covering in which grade levels we're offering paired passage practice, and what skills we're covering in each of the assessed courses. So if you have a few minutes, it's well worth your time, even just to go through the slides, maybe not even the recording itself, but the slides, so that you have a pretty decent idea of where you might seek out information about other question stems or other support materials, so that if you're interested in one of the other topics, then when that grade level posts, you can go back and look at that material or pull out the annotated practice or anything like that to support you. And then we also have the information about the FAQs about passage-based CAT testing. So if you're new to CAT testing, or you're in a different grade level this year and you'd like some information about how it works, that's where you can find that. The SOL practice items that are in TestNav 8 have been updated to be aligned with the 2017 standards, so you can check those out. I do want to reiterate, though, that the purpose of the SOL practice items in TestNav 8 is to give our students practice with TestNav 8. So they might even be questions that you've seen before, because they remain aligned from the old standards to the new standards. So you're not going to go there and find a bunch of new questions, but what you are going to find is a site for students to use and practice navigating TestNav 8 as they get closer to the assessment, so that they can be comfortable with the technology. The 2019 Deeper Learning Conferences and the 2018 SOL Institute presentations are all aligned to the 2017 standards. So if you're interested in any of the presentation material, you can look at those for resources. And then the comprehensive literacy instructional plans, we updated and added a bunch more just a couple weeks ago. So if you haven't checked out that page in a while, we have added to fill in some gaps and some holes. So please check those out. And as Carmen shared before, don't limit yourself to just your grade level. Kind of seek above and below and see what you can tweak and modify. And everything that we use for text examples in those plans, those are just suggestions. Use what you have, use what you're comfortable with. But if we have an approach that will work with your text, try it out. That's kind of what we're asking you to look at. And then Superintendent's Memo 249-20, which came out this fall, reminds everyone that we do have new standards of learning tests in reading that go into effect in spring of 2021. So that helps if you had any questions about whether or not we have tests and what grade, what year standards they are based on. You can get that information from the superintendent's memo. So this is our contact information. We answer our own phones and our own email. We love hearing from you. We're here to help. We obviously want all educators and students and specialists to feel successful in these endeavors. So please know that you can reach out to us at any time. It is our goal to get all of these materials posted as soon as possible. So please keep an eye on that assessment literacy webinar series page, because that's where the material will be posted first. I just want to thank you for sharing this time with us this afternoon. For those of you that are here for the full time, you will be receiving an email tomorrow that can be used if your local division is accepting recertification points that says that you attended this. So if you're interested in joining us for any of the others, we would love to have you sign up for as many as you want. And we please, please, please hope that you will spread the word, share this with a friend, invite them to another, send the recording to them when it's posted, whatever you can do so that we can support students and learning as we move forward this fall. So I want to thank you again for your time, and we hope that you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.